Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet, and thank you for joining me. This podcast is really to circle back on a little nugget that I talked about briefly in the Good Karma Success Coach podcast with my husband, Ryan. I believe it was episode 178. And that is really understanding the different types of relationships that exist. Primarily, I'm going to talk about online. And I briefly mentioned this, but it's something that has been on my mind to talk about even further, even before that podcast, because I think it's something that a lot of people get caught up in. And it has really come into the forefront with what I see on medium.com, which is a lot of writers writing articles about how to get more followers, how to get more followers, how to get more followers, how to get more followers. So with that being said, what I mentioned briefly in the podcast is that it's important to understand who is your audience, who's in your audience, in terms of your connections on the platforms, who's a friend, who's a connection, and I mean like a connection, a good collaborator, and who's a client or a potential client. And there can definitely be crossover between, I'll call it those buckets of people. And I just use that term because it's just an easy term. There can definitely be crossover. There are people that I am friends with online that are friends and collaborators. There are people that are just friends, and I don't ever really see them as a collaborator. Maybe they will be someday, but at this moment, they're not. There are people that I really don't know, but they follow me, and I would say they're in my audience. And then there are people that are clients or potential clients. And those could still be in the audience. They could still be a friend or a collaborator, but likely they're more client audience, right? So I used to get very caught up when I started in social media on that I thought everyone, I don't know where I got this idea, call me crazy, I thought everyone was going to be a potential client or a potential collaborator. I think it's just, I don't know how I'm wired. I just really assumed that. And I went in with this like major expectation of people. And honestly, that was my bad. That was really my bad, and something I had to work through a lot. I would say like in 2020 and probably into 2021 a little bit, just really understanding that, not everyone's going to be a great collaborator. Not everyone's going to become a friend. Not everyone's going to become a client. Not everyone really wants to be in your audience, and being okay with that. And really like letting it go, like really letting it go. And if you've ever spent time working on triggers and working through triggers, it's work. Like it doesn't just disappear like overnight. Like it is work. It's constantly like reminding yourself, constantly almost like putting yourself in the situation to move through it. So eventually you don't have it hit your nervous system. There is like a process to that. And sometimes it can be really not such a great feeling, right? I was listening to someone who was sharing that how do I put this? That when most people aren't awake, they're just like in a state of like being, and they don't really, they're just kind of at a flat line in their life, right? They're not really like on an upward track in terms of business success or awareness. They're just kind of there. And what happens is if you decide, because it's all a decision, to work on your business, work on yourself, get to a next level in life, like up level your life, however you want to put it, it's uncomfortable. It's not easy because you're going to have to work through a lot of yucky stuff, right? To become a better person, to become the best version of yourself. And that's why a lot of people, don't ever do anything, or maybe they do something for a little bit and then they quit because it's yucky, right? So whether it's personal development, working on the stuff that's in your head that you don't share with anybody, or the actual tactical things like doing the thing consistently over time without giving up, which sometimes takes years. Most people don't want to do that. Like most people don't want to do like the mindset work or the tactical. They just don't, or they do one but not the other. You have to do both. So it was a lot of work for me. I digress, but that's really important nugget for people to understand, and understand they're not alone if they're going through that. But a really important piece of all of this was me really understanding that, yeah, not everyone was going to like me, and being okay with that. So not everyone was going to be in my audience. Not everyone was going to choose me as a coach. I don't know. I thought everyone's going to choose me as a coach. But no, and there's gazillions of people and there's gazillions of coaches. So yeah, let it go. The right people find you. And you have to really know that and trust that the right people find you. And all of that really, again, took me a lot of work to like work through it. It was like a daily process of working through that. But now, since I have worked through that, I feel really good. And what I mentioned in the podcast with Ryan was the whole concept of letting people go. Letting people go. So you're going to be wanting to grow your business, but you're growing your business with people that are in alignment to you. They're in alignment to you. There are people that are aligned as a friend, aligned as a collaborator or a good connection. They're aligned as your perfect audience or your perfect client. And that's where you work on your content in regards to those people, right? So it's really an amazing and freeing place to be. But in the process, it wasn't so fun. It really wasn't so fun. And I really just took the bold move in 2021 of just unfriending people on Facebook, and some people blocking them. Some people blocking them for various reasons, which I won't dive into in this podcast, but some eye-opening learnings in hindsight. But you know what? If they're not any of those categories, let's say, like I said, buckets, like why do you need them in your feed? Like you really don't, right? They're not a friend. They're not a collaborator. They're not a client or a future client. And they're not your audience. Let them go. Let them go. Get them out of your social media feed. Unsubscribe from their newsletter. You don't need it. Because what happens is it ends up being a distraction. It ends up being a distraction and an energetic distraction. And we're all working really hard, especially if we listen to this podcast, and making sure your energy is in alignment so you can grow your business, right? And make sales and feel good. That's the whole premise. So if you have these people in your feed and you're like, oh God, why did I get this? And let's be honest, if you like their post because you're trying to be a nice person, then you see more of their posts. Oh my God, stop with all the posts. So it really just makes it worse. That was a huge learning for me. Last year at the end of the year was like, oh, I'm trying to be nice. Okay, this person's not in my audience. They're not a friend. I don't see them as a collaborator. They're not a client, not a potential client. And now I've liked some of their posts. They happen to post 10 times a day. And now my feed is filled with their posts, right? So think about all this stuff. And why I wanted to do this podcast is to give you the encouragement to let people go. Because circling back to what I was talking about in the beginning with Medium, is that, you know what, just because you have a ton of followers, that really doesn't mean that people are reading your content or engaging with you or even seeing you, because the ocean is so bloody. So someone celebrating that they had, 10,000 followers, well, that's good because, yeah, you're going to have a higher percentage of people seeing you. However, like, if they're just following people to follow people, are they really like engaging and reading your content? You don't really know, do you? Right? So it's quite an interesting dynamic if you think about it. So if you're someone who's focusing on having all of these followers, maybe shift your focus a little bit and try to understand, who are you trying to reach? Who are some of these people? And narrow it down a little bit. Narrow down that focus so you're not so overwhelmed and you create better connections. That's the goal. That's the goal. You want to create the best connections or friends, real friends that you can possibly create and grow your business. So those are the things you want. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. Like, it really doesn't at the end of the day. That's not as important. What really matters is how many great friends and connections, like people you would consider the collaborators, and how your business is. So the clients. Are you servicing your clients? Are you having new clients in your pipeline? Are you taking care of those clients? Are you building connections with them? That is really what's most important, not the number of followers. So I hope this podcast sheds a little light for anyone struggling out there on social media. Social media can be a huge trigger for so many people. Let's face it, it is not always the best thing, but it's not going anywhere. So as I learned, I had to make friends with it. I had to figure it out. I had to figure out how to use the social media platforms so I could grow my business, make sales, and feel good. And that's what I help people on. So I hope this podcast helps you. If you're interested in connecting further, please reach out to me with any of the links that is in the show notes, private one-on-one coaching, or my private Facebook group, Beyond Basic. And I am starting a free mastermind that will encompass focus, goal setting, accountability, sharing ideas, any of those buckets that you feel you need a little help on this year, help with. Feel free to join. The more the merrier in terms of collaborating and sharing ideas. I would love to see you. So until next week, I hope you crush it in sales. Thanks for listening.